May the Obelisk of Light guide your path on this night of Halloween. On this channel, I like to talk about the individual units or base defenses of the Command & Conquer games, describe them in a somewhat realistic way, or at least to draw comparisons to real-world elements of a similar nature. This is me trying to get to the core of what I think it would be like to fight in these wars, as if I were to enlist myself. Rarely do I get to approach subjects that, once explained, become truly terrifying to talk about. The Obelisk of Light is one such subject, one that, not unlike the terror drone, is both a threat and a frightening example of the ingenuity of man and his eternal mission to kill things more efficiently. For October, at the end of the month, we will be discussing the single most iconic base defense in RTS history, possibly next to the Tesla Coil, the laser weapon that haunts the hearts of all GDI personnel everywhere. The Obelisk of Light was born out of Project Obelisk, WDTA 24115, a development project that was started before the outbreak of the First Tiberium War out of a need to have a solid base defense, powerful enough to fight the collective armies of the free world. This project was nominally worked on throughout the former Soviet bloc countries, but took a significant amount of research and development out of the growing Star Wars initiative, the same program that led to the formation of GDI. Kane wanted a weapon that could destroy anything that would rise against him, no matter the size or the strength. He wanted a weapon that would make such a statement, one that was iconic, totemic, divine even. And that is exactly what he got. The first iteration of the Obelisk was a towering expression of power, but also the most flawed, literally as well as demonstratively. Each one stood a staggering 300 meters tall, and were covered in hardened ceramic tiling to help dissipate the excessive heat generated by the banks upon banks of massive capacitors hitting in the ground under the device, and to armor the sides against the inevitable violence that would come with the declaration of the First Tiberium War. Entirely controlled by computers, the first iteration of the Obelisk suffered from what many of these autonomous weapons systems suffered from in the post-Cold War era, a bit of a hair trigger. Autonomous weapons, such as AI-controlled sentry units in real life, are unimaginably effective instruments, capable of acquiring and eliminating targets from over a kilometer away, almost across the horizon. But they are notorious for their rather extreme prejudice, with which they eliminate any threats that cross their sensor range. Legitimate targets are eliminated perfectly, but so are animals, wind-blown shrubs, and falling rocks. And many times these systems would not stop until targets were nothing but pink smudges on the ground. While effective, it is not necessarily the military's charter to obliterate every enemy as it approaches, and captives can be as useful as dead combatants, not to mention the effect that a weapon such as this would have on the perception of the country through the Geneva Convention. These first models of the Obelisk, when tested in extreme secrecy, in specially hidden stealth bases, had a habit of explosively vaporizing anything that offended them and was not offering the correct friend or foe signal. And that last part was a part of the problem because many of the doctrines of the Brotherhood relied on the absence of signals to allow for proper ambushes and stealth. Kane scientists managed to fix this, likely with their first version of the AI that would come to be known as Cabal, which, while undergoing significant development still, was based to some degree off of the EVA system used by GDI and former NATO countries, and so was able to do a better autonomous signal differentiation between targets. This allowed many bases equipped with these monstrous machines to hide in rather undisturbed ecosystems, which increased their lethal capabilities. In the beginning of the war, the obelisks were quite rare, usually relegated to important bases critical to the war effort, These were encountered mostly by those in the most bitter of fighting, leading them to have a rather frightening reputation. And to explain why they would be so feared, let me describe how they function. While they are not able to target flying vehicles, likely due to an underwhelming responsiveness of the targeting systems when faced with extremely fast-moving objects, the obelisks were designed to pick out any enemy target from nearly any distance, within line of sight, using a variety of visual mediums. Once a target was detected by the obelisk, it would begin to hum loudly as the capacitors inside began to charge, a sound which did not carry far on the wind, and when filled with power, the laser hidden at the apex of the tower would release its energy in an incredibly short burst, hitting the target near instantly. What would happen to the target depended largely on the type of target and its composition. An individual soldier hit with a beam would be explosively vaporized, showering the area with viscera and a cloud of superheated gas, as well as leaving a nice little flaming hole in the ground behind them where the laser drilled several meters into the ground. Light vehicles would have a similar fate, where their engine compartment, munitions bay, or crew quarters would be breached, and then anything inside would detonate when a laser hotter than the surface of the sun made sudden contact with it. Likely, the fuel and munitions would detonate, causing complete destruction of the vehicle at the speed of light, and if not, it would cook the people inside to the point of instant death. Heavier vehicles like main battle tanks or super heavies could weather at least a single hit reliably, especially as armor technology got better over the course of the Tiberium Wars. But even if the people inside survived the hit, the vehicle was likely knocked out. Only mammoth tanks were armored enough in the First War to directly duel with obelisks, and the later Mk2 mammoth walkers could shrug off dozens of hits with their exotic armor plating. Anything less than these titans of war would melt at a single hit from these towering structures. That is true, but their lethality wasn't their true horror. No, the horror of these obelisks is in the dual features of both absolute silence and the invisible nature of their weapon. An obelisk, when close, could be heard as the capacitors ramped up, but not if one was more than, say, 100 meters away from it. This meant, along with the fact that the actual beam is invisible to the naked eye, that no one attempting to fight in its vicinity could directly pinpoint its location or predict its next strike. To the enemy it was obliterating. It would look as though a nearby tank or armored vehicle simply erupted into flame for no reason, and the exact location of the tower was not known or obscured through stealth technology. There would be no effective way of countering it. Death would be instantaneous, and where it wouldn't be, morale would plummet. In these days, however, heat given off by the obelisks meant that the armor on them was fairly minimal. They tended to give off a serious IR signature that was easy to follow, if you could get close enough to them. A few well-placed shots, or especially a well-directed air or artillery strike, could take them out, and if an ion cannon was on standby, they could level the entire structure in moments' notice. So they were not invincible by any means, except in the minds of the GDI soldiers told to assault the structure. The period between the First and Second Tiberium War was a time of great turmoil, after Kane's alleged death, with many Nod factions vying for control over the Brotherhood's vast Tiberium supply. But the main faction, the one led by Anton Slavic, and the one aware of Kane's continued presence in the war effort, continued to iterate on the obelisk's design. The second obelisk was designed much more for direct combat, being similarly tall but larger overall, and angled for shrugging off more fire. This reflected a change in the Brotherhood's apparent plans for the war, as they seemed no longer to attempt to take over the world completely, rather to stall GDI long enough to use their treasured secret weapon. This new obelisk was more defensive in nature, and although controlled directly by Cabal across the battlefield, lacked some of the menace of the first version, at least initially. In the period between the wars, morale in GDI had grown tremendously. lifted in spirits by their victory, and they had created their own specialized weapons. Their new walkers were aided by significant armor breakthroughs, and were now able to shrug off more damage from the former Obelisk designs. However, the advances made by Cabal and the Brotherhood scientists had not been stagnant either, and commanders in the field began to hear the old, familiar cries of terror, mixed in with the frustration of tanks' crews as their shots bounced off the angled armor of the new Obelisk designs, which were now covered by an internal layer of Tiberium-derived armor, as well as heat-dispersing ceramic plates. A good hit by heat round, penetrating the layer of the ceramic, no longer instantly disabled the structure, which the GDI and Forgotten Forces noted with begrudging admiration. After the First and during the Second Tiberium War, the main weakness of the Obelisk was being addressed. The idea of the Obelisk being able to hit both ground and air targets was floated around, and even made it through a few of the initial stages of development before the second supposed death of Kane put a damper on the human advancement efforts. Cabal, however, with Kane's body interred within his system, continued to work on the design and eventually made a breakthrough of his own. Commandeering the Mark of Kane, the secret project Kane had been developing to end all conflict with GDI and anyone else that could put up a fight against him, Cabal attacked both sides and attempted to put an end to all human life. Thankfully, he was defeated, but the Obelisk of Darkness that he created, the Obelisk designed to defeat air targets, absolutely savaged the combined forces of GDI and Nod, and the victory over Cabal was one at such a cost it was many years before either of the organizations recovered fully. The Cabal obelisks were more advanced in every way, faster charging, more damaging, and more efficient in their power systems. Efforts were made to reacquire the technology, but no one in the aftermath was capable of reproducing them. In the time between the Second and Third Wars, Kane worked to develop a new plan, a new brotherhood, for the new landscape of the world after the defeat in the Second War. Since both defeats of Nod had somehow not been capitalized on by GDI, the Brotherhood had simply become a part of the world, a power block that was generally accepted as being around, rather than the true enemy it had been seen as in past years. Kane saw the value in the Brotherhood as a revolutionary force against the very real oppression of GDI in some of their Yellow Zone strongholds. In this way, he moved away from the purely military designs of the Second War and moved towards designs that once again projected the presence of Nod across the world. Buildings in the Brotherhood became more ornate, and stealth technology became more prevalent. Every structure was a statement of intent. With the reveal of Kane once again being active in the world stage, the Brotherhood's fractious parties began to assemble around their true leader once more. In this, one should not take the position that the third generation of obelisks were less powerful than their predecessors. Rather, they were designed with different intentions in mind. The obelisks were just as tall, but far better armored, and shimmered with the incredible power built into their systems. But they're also designed to be works of art, of propaganda, to rally the split factions of a world-spanning empire into a single entity. Each was a statement that Kane and his Brotherhood was here to stay. The plating used by the towers was derived from new Tiberium alloys. The structure was almost devoid of its obvious IR signature. The trade-off was that much of the construction of these buildings was publicized, leading to their positions being well known. The capacitors used by these structures were even more powerful and allowed the obelisk to address a key weakness, that it could only hit one target at a time. If not properly supported, an obelisk could be attacked by a plethora of infantry and be very easily overwhelmed, even if they did project the sniper effect rather effectively. The new upgrade allowed for a single beam to cross through infantry groups, not always hitting but always maiming their targets. An additional upgrade was added onto the system that allowed the beam cannon artillery platforms to charge the obelisk to deal damage over larger areas, as well as charge far more quickly. With the aid of these units, The silent and devastating structure could be made to double its efficiency, allowing a single tower to hold off entire armies if properly supported. While these obelisks could still not hit flying targets, they were capable of inspiring weapon platforms, which allowed the Brotherhood of Nod to fight on an even footing with the juggernaut that was GDI in this era. And a little extra at the end with a theory from Bad Guy 292. Imagine for the moment that the timelines between the game series interchange at some point. The Tiberium universe follows from the Red Alert universe. The Obelisk of Light was most likely invented with knowledge that the Brotherhood of Nod, and by extension the Soviet Union, gathered from salvaging the Prism Towers and Prism Tanks from the Allies during the alternate Third World War, as said in Red Alert 2. Being a formidable weapon, the GDI converted this technology into the ion cannon. The Brotherhood took this technology for the obelisks and later the laser turrets. An extremely compelling idea that, while I do not subscribe to it personally, will likely make a great deal of sense to many of the true fans of Command & Conquer. I hope you enjoy the video. If you have an idea that might strengthen or reduce the strength of my argument, or you just want to start a conversation, please comment it down below. If you come up with something great, I will host it as a follow-up video and credit you heavily. If you like the videos about Tiberium, Red Alert, or in the future, CNC Generals, then why don't you hit subscribe and hit the bell icon. I post once or twice every 2 weeks. If you really like the content, consider supporting the channel by sharing the video around or making use of either the Patreon link or the Amazon affiliate link. No pressure to do either. I love you either way. Thank you for watching, and I hope you have a wonderful day.